Chapter 2. ITA China KTA Shady. At that time none of us quite believed in the time machine. The fact is, the time traveler was one of those men who are too clever to be believed. You never felt that you saw all around him. You always suspected some subtle reserve, some ingenuity in ambush, behind his lucid frankness. Had Philby shown the model and explained the matter, the time traveler swords which would have shown him far less skepticism. For we should have perceived his motives. A poor butcher could understand Philby. But the time traveler had more than a touch of whim among his elements, and we distrusted him. Things that would have made the frame of a less clever man seemed tricks in his hands. It is a mistake to do things too easily. The serious people who took him seriously never felt quite sure of his deportment. They were somehow aware that trusting their reputations for judgment with him was like furnishing a nursery with eggshell-kina. So didn't he think and fussed very much about time traveling in the interval between Pat Thursday and the next, though its odd potentialities were no doubt in most of your mind's explorability, that is, its practical incredibleness, the curious possibilities of anachronism and of utter confusion it suggested. For my own part, I was particularly preoccupied with the trick of the model that I remember discussing with medical man, whom I met on Friday at the Linnean. He said he had seen a similar thing at Tübingen, and laid considerable stress on the blowing out of the candle. But how the trick was done he could not explain. The next Thursday I went again in Torquement. I suppose I was one of the timid traveller's most constant ghosts, and, arriving late, found 4 or 5 in mine already assembled in his drawing room. The medical man was standing before the fire with a sheet of paper in one hand and his watch in the other. I looked round for the timid traveller and it shelf. Past servant now, said the medical man. I suppose you'd be after have diner. Where s ? Said the name their host. You've just come ? It answer fit rod. He shoon avoidably they tained. He asks me in this note to lead off with dinner at 7 if he's not back. Say she'll explain when he comes. It seems Petito let the dinner spoil, said he to borrow a well-known daily paper, and thereupon the doctor rang the bell. The psychologist was the only person beside us, the doctor and myself, who had attended Tepravia dinner. The other men were blank. The editor aforementioned, a certain journalist, and another a quiet, shy man with a beard whom he didn't know and who, as far as my observation went, never opened his mouth all evening. There was some speculation at the dinner table about the time traveler's absence, and I suggested time traveling, in a half-jocular spirit. The editor wanted that explained to him, and the psychologist volunteered an account of the ingenious paradox and trick we had witnessed that day week. He was in the midst of his exposition when the door from the corridor opened slowly and without noise. I was facing the door, and saw it first. Alone, I said, at last, and the door opened wider, and the timid traveller stood before us. He gave a outcry of surprise. Good heavens! Man, what's amateur ? Cried the medical man, who saw him next, and the whole table turned towards the door. He was in an amazing plight. His coat was dusty and dirty, camp smeared with green down. His sleeves had shared disordered, and as it seemed to me greater either with dust and dirt or because its color had actually faded. His face was ghastly pale, his chin had a brown cut on it, a cut half-healed, his expression was haggard and drawn as the intensities of furring. For a moment his hesitating figure was as if had been dazzled by the light. Then it came into the room. He walked with just such a limp as I have seen in footsore tramps. We stared at him in silence, expecting him to speak. He said not a word, but came painfully to the table, and made a motion towards mine. The editor filled a glass of champagne, and pushed it towards him. He drained it, and it seemed to do him good. For looked round fedible and fag hostile, his salt smile flickered across his face. What on earth have I been up to, man? Said the doctor. The time traveler did not seem to hear. Don't let me disturb you, he said, with a certain faltering articulation. I'm all right. He stopped, held out his glass for more, and took it off at a draught. That eschewed his head. His eyes grew brighter and a faint color came into his cheeks. His glance flickered over our faces with a certain dull approval, and then went round the warm and comfortable room. Then he spoke again, still as it were foolish and guys words. I am joined to Andres and Finny Elk met out and explain things. Save me some of that mutton. I'm starving for a bit of meat. He looked across at the editor of the rare visitor and hoped at Waitselright. Feeded a bit in a question. Telly presently said to the traveler. I am funny! Be all right in a minute. He put down his glass, and walked towards the staircase door. Again I remarked his lameness and the soft padding sound of his footfall, and standing up in mid-place I saw his feet went out. Had no thin gun-cumbo pair of attack, blood-stained socks. Then the door closed upon him. I had both meaned if allowed till he remembered how had done a fuss about himself. For Amy knew perhaps my mind was wool-gathering. Then remarkable behavior eminent scientist heard he did RCE thinking after his want-in headlines. And this brought my attention back to the bright dinner table. What's the game? Said a journalist. Hashabindo. Infimator capper? I didn't follow. I met the psychologist, and read my own interpretation in his face. I thought of the time traveler limping painfully upstairs. I don't think anyone else had noticed his lameness. The first door covered completely from the surprise was the medical man, who rang the bell. The time traveler hated to have servants waiting at dinner for a hot plate. At that the editor ordered his knife and fork with a grunt, and the silent man followed suit. The dinner was resumed. Conversation was exclamatory for a little while, with gaps of wonderment, and then the editor got fervent in his curiosity. Does our friend Dick his modest income view at that crossing? Or his Nebuchadnezzar faces? Hindward. If he was sure it's just business. Soft had him mad keen eyes and took up his psychologist's account for previous meeting. The new guests were frankly incredulous. The editor raised objections. What was this time traveling? A man couldn't cover himself with dust by rolling in a paradox, could he? And then asked Haiti Cameron team Harris or Ted to caricature. Hadn't they any clothes brushes in the future? The journalist would not believe the odd net price and join at editor and PC work of a cheaping ridiculously unfully thing. They worried both the new Kindle journalist Vera Joyce IR, Reverend T. Algina. Our special correspondent into the After Tomorrow reports a journalist was being wrath, CR shouting when the time traveler came back. He was dressed in ordinary evening clothes, and nothing save his haggard look remained of the change that had startled me. Isaiah said he did or Hillary Lisa captured say you have been traveling in top Femadilio next Tell Lou Sal about little Roseberry. Will you? What will you take for the lot? The time traveler came to the place reserved for him without a word. He smoked quietly in his salty where's my mutton? He said. What a treat it is to stick a fork into meat again. Story! Cried the editor. Story Belgium! Said the traveler. I will some think to eat. A 1 TSA award dune delight some Tony into my arteries. Thanks. And the salt. One word savvy. Have I been traveling? Yes, said the time traveler, with his mouth full, nodding his head. Idea Jivia Shillin Gorlines or verbatim note said he. The torn. The time traveler pushed his glass towards the silent man and drank it with his fingernail. A twitched the silent man, who had been staring at his face, started convulsively, and poured him with Perez Dorfheer was uncomfortable. For my own part sudden questions kept on rising to my lips, and I dare say it was the same with the others. The journalist tried to relieve the tension by telling anecdotes of Harry Potter. The time traveler devoted his attention to his dinner and displayed the appetite of a tramp. The medical man smoked a cigarette and watched the timid traveler thrust his eyelashes. The silent man seemed even more reclusive than usual, and drank champagne with regularity and determination out of sheer nervousness. At last the time traveler pushed his flat away and looked round. I suppose Simmel apologize, he said. I was simply starving. I've had the most amazing time. He reached out his hand for a cigar, and cut the bucket atop that smoking room. It's too long gasto, right to tell over greasy plates. And drenching the lint passing, he led the way into the adjoining room. You have told blank, and dash, and chose about the machine ? He said Tom leaning back in each errand naming the three new guests. But things a mere paradox, said the editor. I can targue it tonight. I didn't mind to lynch out the story. Beauty can targue. Will you and tell you out that story what her Shatner Tom by fine like beauty demonstrate rain frozen. Interruptions. I wanna tell it. Badly. Most of it will sound like lying. So bait! Exclamation point. It's true, every word of it. Of the same. I was in the laboratory at 4 o'clock, and since then I believed of geese such days as no human being ever lived before. I nearly worn out, beautish and sleepy, like wheedled this thing over to you. Then I shall go to bed. But no interruptions. Is it agreed? Agreed, said the editor, and the rest of you agreed. And with that the timid traveler began his story as he had set it forth. Hesitated there at first and spoke like a weary man. Afterwards he got more animated. In writing it down I feel with only too much keenness the inadequacy of pen and ink, and above all, my own inadequacy to express its quality. Yon reader will suppose attentively he knew, but you cannot see the speaker's white sincere face, see in that bright circle of he little lamp nor heart intonation of his voice. You cannot know how his expression followed the turns of his sturdy exclamation point. Most of us ears were in shadow, for the candles in that smoking room had not been lighted abundantly. The face of a journalist and the legs of silent from that knees downward were illuminated. At first we glanced now and again at each other. After a time we ceased to do that, and looked dully at the timid traveler's face.